Welcome, everybody, to an episode of Courageous Possibilities where we have a beautiful guest. Today, I have Nisha Moodley. Welcome, Nisha.
Thank you, Joe. So happy to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for being with me. I'm really excited about having a conversation with you today. And I'm just going to introduce you for everybody who hasn't yet heard of you and your beautiful work. Nisha is a women's leadership mentor, the founder of Global Sisterhood Day, the host of Devotion podcast, and a mother. As a biracial woman with a background and training in health and executive coaching, ancestral healing work, energy healing, and community building, she has a unique relationship to the ecology of leadership and the ability to catalyze deep growth for her clients. Her work centers around the path of matriarchal leadership as an expression of our devotional care. For 17 years, Nisha's guided intimate counsels, online courses, and over 60 retreats, supporting women to liberate their leadership and weave their gifts in service of a more beautiful world. Yay! Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Celebrating all of that and very grateful as one of the participants on one of those retreats over the years that you have been offering them. And I also love today we're here to talk about what courageous possibilities could offer for humanity, for the world, for the planet, for all beings everywhere. But really excited first to hear about what courageous possibilities have brought you to where you are today. Where has courage really tested you?
Ah, I feel like for all of us, it's probably true that we wouldn't be where we are without so much courage. The big courage, the big moments of the courage, like the standout moments and all the little moments too, the big moments where we like decide to quit the job or decide to go against the path that was set out for us by our family and say, I'm actually going to do this, or I'm going to, go with love instead of security, or like all those moments the big moments, the big, like life defining moments that call on our courage, but also the little courageous moments of being like, oh, my ego really doesn't want to apologize right now, but I need to just turn back around and say, I'm really sorry, and make the repair and, the courage to, speak up about something that we see that is happening that's not right, that we, have the ability to use our voice around. So I think courage is such a beautiful theme to be exploring around. And one of the things that I love about the word courage is like the root word cœur, in French, probably not pronouncing that right, but heart. I always think of courage as being led by love, being led by the heart. And so, anyways, that's my little waxing poetic, romantic courage as a theme. I really love it. But I would say, like, specifically recently in my life, um, in the last few years, I think the biggest courage for me has come. There's a few things that come to mind. One is walking the path of separation from my kid's dad,
Mhm.
which, you're a mom, it's such a big thing to contemplate, let alone explore actively. And then in our case, what was true was to go down that path and follow that path. And, I had to face so much fear, so much self-judgment around failure and what if I had done this wrong, and or what if we had done this instead, and what if I hadn't been so, bitchy or demanding or bossy
Mhm.
or this, that, and the other. Like, what if we could have allied around our traumas instead of had such a difficult time navigating, with the realities of our traumas, that all humans have. And so it was a real reckoning,
Mhm.
it was a real reckoning. And also, I think the deepest courage was following the longing for what I really wanted in my life, even though it meant that it might break my children's hearts.
Mm.
And that was really, really hard because I think that as mothers, we are so oriented, and I know I'm speaking in big generalizations here, but I'm sure most, if not all, mothers will find some resonance in this. Like, I think that we are so oriented towards, protecting our children, protecting them from, you know, getting sick, protecting them from, unkindness, harshness, danger, protecting them even from our bad patterns, like the funkier patterns that we have
Mhm.
in our lives and our own, unhealed trauma coming out at them. Like there's such an orientation towards protection. And so to do something, I think, of course, everyone is going to experience brokenheartedness many times in this lifetime,
Mm.
most likely. We're going to lose our parents one day. We're going to lose other people that we love, most likely, and moving and, breakups and all the things that create heartbreak. I'm sure, like, I can't even quite look at the reckoning that one day my children will move out. I'm like, oh, what will that be like, to have them just out in the world? And what if they decide to live far away from me? And, all of these things. So heartbreak is inevitable. And also, there's a part of me as a mom, because I'm protective and I love them, that I don't want to do anything that's going to cause them heartbreak. And yet, um, it just was the true thing that had to happen for us, for both of us to walk a path that felt more aligned for each of us. And so I think that not turning away from the reality that all of that held, not turning away from the grief of it, was a big, called on a lot of courage in me, because I think, yes, it was courageous to make the choice, do the thing because it felt true to do. But also, I think it's very easy to just say these kind of cute bumper sticker things that aren't not, they're not necessarily untrue, like kids are better off if their parents are happy. Okay, sure, yeah, maybe that's true. And
Mm.
these sweet bumper stickers that we want to say to make ourselves feel really good. And even though I came to a place of feeling really right and settled in my choice, I still had to just grapple with the tremendous grief of our family is taking a new form.
Yeah.
And it might be very painful, especially for our kids. And I think that to actually allow myself to feel that grief has made me, in some ways, less afraid of their feelings around it and more attuned, instead of like uh, terrified. Like, oh no, are you okay? Are they okay? Is that a sign? Is that,
Yeah.
where I think if I really wasn't grappling with my own grief and my own, understanding that this might be really hard for them, and kind of letting that go all the way through, yeah, I just think it's allowed me to be more attuned to where they actually are, which, maybe not surprisingly, but sometimes it's surprising when we're like really checking to make sure that they're well, to be like, oh, you're actually doing really well. We're okay. We're surviving this thing.
Mm.
Yeah. So, just on a personal level, I think that's a place that's really called on a lot of courage for me in the last few years. And um, relocating my family was another big courageous call, but it felt like the true thing to do. Um, Gosh, there's been so many big moments. I think that COVID really catalyzed a lot for us. And I know for a lot of people, catalyzed a lot in their lives
Mhm.
around career and family and work and, location. Um, so it's called on a lot of courage in the last few years, especially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And something that stood out for me, you used the phrase or similar phrase a couple of times, was it just felt true. I love, like, with decisions that are the really heart-based decisions, right? When we're in these relationships and our heart's really involved, as much as we want to learn and discover and find how our heart's guiding us in all sorts of ways, these are really those like traditionally heartbreaky places. But I love that you use the word true. Like it just felt true. Um, and I'm curious around for people that maybe that's not a language that they're familiar with. Like, because I feel like that's more of the to me, that's more of like an embodied language than a sort of, okay, I've worked out the two lists and this is the pros and the cons, and this is the one that, and it's the very sort of head list. And I wonder if you could talk a bit more to the word true or what that means for you.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I think probably everyone has had the experience at some point of doing pro con lists, whether it's like actually on paper or in our minds. And sometimes there are some very logical conclusions that we can make from pro con lists, right? Like this is clearly that there's more check boxes over here, so this is the way that I should go. And probably all of us, or most of us, have had the experience of that thing sometimes not quite feeling right,
Mhm.
even though it seems like the logical solution, you know. I think a great example is like, oh, he's got the good job and he's got, nice teeth and he's tall.
Yeah.
He's got a lovely family and check, 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 check. All the boxes are checked. And like, oh, but I'm like, I'm not really attracted to him. Or there's not, there's something missing or just doesn't feel
Yeah.
right for me for whatever reason. And I think that I want to say, particularly for women, although I think this is true for all people, but there are particularities for those of us who were socialized as girls and women,
Mhm.
where we are very taught, you know, even if our families did a good job of trying to create a counter to this, the overculture where most of us have grown up um, really conditioned us to think our cravings, our desires, our emotions, our sense of things is totally backwards. It's not just like maybe off, it's backwards. It's wrong. If you have cravings, they're dangerous. They're gonna you're gonna make bad choices, right? If you have desires, those are dangerous. They're gonna have you make bad choices. And so there's this sort of like embodied mistrust that most of us have in our bodies, in our intuition, in our sense of things. And what I mean, that's very sad, right?
Mhm.
It's like, I can't trust anything from here down.
Yeah.
This and the math that this does, I can trust. But it's interesting because we also know that our minds can take us in all sorts of different directions and convince us that things that are healthy for, like really truly healthy and good for us are bad for us, and things that are bad for us are great for us. So,
Mhm.
it's interesting that we've decided to give a lot of trust to this part of us, but not this part of us. And what if instead we had grown up in cultures, subcultures, in a world where we were taught to listen more deeply,
Mm.
to notice and track more carefully? There were a time where all of our ancestors could go out into their local region and know by looking at the plants which ones were safe, which ones are dangerous, which ones needed to be harvested at a particular time, how to harvest in a good way.
Mm.
And they could do all of that while sort of tracking the babies and tracking for danger and noticing the weather
Yeah.
and remembering their way home without GPS. So that all comes from a deep collaboration with the body and the mind
Mm.
and an embodied way of moving through life.
Mhm.
And so, what I'm really interested in is how do we, instead of say this part, this is not trustable, this is trustable, kind of, or what other people who, are smarter than me or wiser than me say is trustable, but I'm not. What if instead we were like, I'm going to cultivate trust. I'm going to I'm going to heal the divide in myself. And I'm going to start to bridge the gaps and mend trust with myself. And I think part of how we do that is we have to start courageously trusting our own sense making, our own intuition, our own feeling for things. So that, when I started dating, for example, I met someone, we chatted, we met on a dating app, we chatted back and forth. We didn't live in the same town. Um, you know, Spoiler alert, we've been together now for a year and a half. But when we were about to go on our first date, we were all excited. And then it's sort of like, oh gosh, we've both put a lot of excitement into this. And like, what if it doesn't work out? So we then started to have that conversation like, okay, no pressure, And I said, well, the truth is, I have to smell you. I've never
Mhm.
smelled you. And he
Mhm.
kind of laughed, but he also got it. And
Yeah.
it's true. I'm like, if I get near you and my animal instinct is like, mm-mm,
Yeah.
I don't want this one. Like, that's
Yeah.
actually part of how we used our senses to say what we're attracted to and what's good for us. That's part of it. This animal body knows a thing. And I knew I needed to smell him to see if
Yeah.
that thing was there. It's not the only thing, but it was part of what needed to be there. And so that trusting, we do have to, I think, begin and to weave this all back to your question about when something felt true.
Mm.
Part of it was feeling into um, if I really trust this body, if I really trust my own intuition, if I actually trust my desires. And yes, sometimes my body's reactions um, are driven by traumas
Mm.
and not necessarily by truth. And sometimes my desires are driven by escapism that are shaped by traumas and not by truth.
Yeah.
So it's not that I'm going to just trust every single thing that ever comes out of me from my mind or my body forever. I can hold that paradox of like, okay, some of my reactivity,
Mhm.
especially reactivity, can be driven by trauma for sure. And that doesn't always have us make healthy decisions,
Mhm.
you know. And some of my cravings might be driven by escapism or fear or avoidance or overwhelm. And that isn't always going to be the healthiest thing for me. But if I can sort of hold this paradox of trusting what feels deeply true, what feels like it's coming from a deeper place inside of me, and also having some supportive beloveds in my life that can reflect things back to me and help me navigate well in a good way towards my truth. I mean, this is why we have friends. This is why we have coaches. This is why we have therapists. Like the reason that we have people who kind of navigate with us, naturopaths, midwives. I think
Mhm.
of these as like helpers, the people that walk with us, walk beside us, and can say, I hear you. Let's expand our, range of awareness. Or have you considered this? Or what if we slow down here?
Mhm.
So these helpful people not to tell me what to do, but to walk with me and for me to say, hey, this is sort of what I'm feeling. Do you have any blind spots to point out here? you know? And so it's that both the collaboration of, you know, outsourcing a little bit of my trust, not to say, tell me what to do, but walk with me.
Mm.
I asked my friends through the separation and into my new relationship, will you walk with me? Help me see what I'm not seeing. Help
Yeah.
me face what I'm afraid to face or avoiding facing, consciously or unconsciously. Help me navigate the grief, help me temper, not temper my excitement, but like not get lost in my excitement. Help me be grounded in my excitement.
Yeah.
All of these things. Help me not get lost in my grief. Help me
Mhm.
not fall through the center of the earth in my grief, but grieve well and stay sturdy.
Mm.
So it's that combination of, okay, there's desires here, there are instincts here, there are inclinations here. I'm going to put a little more weight of trust on those.
Yeah.
And then in the places where I wonder, wait, is this like conditioning? Is this trauma or is this like truth? If I'm not sure, that's why I have coach. That's why I have friends. That's why I have people that I can say, help me navigate this thing. Is this my trauma or is this my truth? You know?
Hmm.
And also I think that practice of having support of others
Yeah.
to help reflect and walk with us and help guide us, and also giving more trust to our instincts, to our desires and our longings and our cravings. I think that combination actually has those longings, desires, cravings become more trustable over time,
Yeah.
become more like deeply honest and more healthy over time. So, um, yeah, that's what I can say about it felt deeply true because I was doing that work of practicing trusting
Yeah.
myself and also getting the support from trustable people in my life to say, help me see what I'm not seeing and face what I'm not facing.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. In so many ways of the particularly the second part of like having those people that can help you see what you're not seeing. Just because I really feel like that's something else as we explore possibilities and what else is possible that feels like it's coming through more women that I meet, but I know my husband's now joined a men's circle, and I think it's amazing that he's sitting there and actually able to open his heart and cry in front of others and be in one of those spaces. But this that we're not doing it all on our own. That this like I feel like there's a lot of that woven through your teachings and your sharings and leadership too. I'd love to hear a bit more about what comes up for you as I say that.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I was talking about this yesterday with somebody that what if the things that we were just like, I'm not sure, like, I don't know. Should I
Mhm.
stay or should I go? I don't know. Should I quit my job or should I stay in my job? I don't know. Um, you know, what was I talking about it in the context of with someone yesterday? I can't even remember. But in any case, there are these things that we all have, little things, big things that we're not sure about. And I find often we try to like, okay, I'm gonna try to go down the rabbit hole and figure this out for myself. Where I was talking about it somebody with somebody yesterday. It wasn't even an I'm not sure. It was I was teaching a workshop and we were creating rites of passage.
Oh.
And some people were asking like, how do I don't know what to do. Like how do you even make a ritual for yourself? And I said, maybe if we don't know how to make a ritual for ourselves, it's because we're not meant to make it for ourselves or by
Mm.
ourselves. Um, we are largely as modern humans so separated from true community living. Case in point, most people have their own lawnmower, their own blender, their own car, their
Mhm.
own, some of those things we use every day. I use my car every day. I use my spatula every day. I use my
Yeah.
pans every day. I don't use a lawnmower every day. Why do I need to have my
Mm.
own lawnmower?
Mhm.
It's interesting the way that our societies are largely built now for anyone that lives in like a contemporary, society.
Yeah.
Houses, the front of the house faces the street, the back of the house faces a backyard. There's fences on the side. This is
Mhm.
mine. This little plot is mine. I live here. And we do that emotionally. We do that with our decision making. We do that with all of the logistics. We do that with the responsibilities of
Mhm.
adulting and parenting and running a home and running a life. We do that with running a business. We're so siloed from each other. And none of our ancestors lived like that. We are not, we are pack animals. We are communal creatures. We've adapted that way over across humanity. We are meant to be together. If you don't hold a baby when they're born, they don't get enough touch, they will not thrive. They could be getting food, they could be getting technically all of the correct nutrients, but without touch, they wither.
Mm.
That says a lot. It teaches us everything that we need to know about how communal we are as creatures. We need one another. It's not just a nice to have, it's a need to have. And so I think with decision making and with our emotions, I mean, with all of these realms of things, the more we can start to weave ourselves back into community, the more we're starting to actually create the type of embodied shifts towards the world that we want to live in. And, before we started recording, you said a thing that I had shared on my website, which is the biggest question that I have asked people for, I don't know, probably 12 years now, is what is your vision for a more beautiful world? And people have different versions of it. Like they'll tell me different things that they see in their vision. But the thing that has struck me, I have read and heard thousands, literally thousands of responses from people. And I'm like, y'all, we are literally dreaming of the same world. Now, you might be looking at it through this facet, and I'm looking at it through this facet, and someone else is looking at it through this facet, but we're all looking at the same thing. Nobody is saying, like, oh, the more beautiful world I can imagine is literally no one has said war, famine, the destruction of these people, the end of these species, taking off in a rocket to Mars and living there. Nobody I've talked to, anyways. Everyone I've talked to is like peace,
Mhm.
right relationship with the earth, right relationship with each other, sharing, everybody getting to do work that's meaningful for them, everybody having enough,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
there is a togetherness, there is a sharing, there is a collaboration, there is a harmony, there's a working together, moving together that
Mhm.
literally every single person that I have heard from is sharing some elements of that same thing. And so we talk about capitalism and anti-capitalism and, changing the systems and destroying the systems and all of that stuff. And I'm like, okay, but what do we put in its place?
Yeah.
What are we creating? Okay, we have all these things that we know don't work
Mm.
or aren't working for everybody. We have all these things that we talk about getting rid of and burning and destroying and changing and flipping on their heads, but what to make what? To do
Yeah.
what? And all I can imagine is it must be to make that more beautiful world that we all say we want to create. And I think one of the most tangible ways that every single person who is watching this or listening to this can participate in creating that more beautiful world is to start intentionally weaving the threads of community. And there's so many ways that we can do it. Like just starting with one of the things that I love as a thought experiment is, we can knock on all the wood and do all the protection spells before we do this. But if we imagined a natural disaster hitting our
Mhm.
area, let's say that the power is out now for a week or something.
Mm.
What do you do? Probably what we would do is we would get out of our houses and we would walk around and we'd look for each other. How are you? What do you need? Do you have what you need? Oh, has anybody checked on that house? Oh, there's an older person that's living in that house. We need to check on them. Let's see if they're okay. So and so's cat is missing. Okay, everybody tell everyone that you see that their cat is missing.
Mhm.
We wouldn't just stay in our house and
Yeah.
eat all the baked beans and hide away. If we would check on each other,
Yes. Mm.
we would go out and we would check on each other. Most of us, those who had the capacity, the nervous system
Yeah.
capacity to do so, right? We would check on each other. And yet here we are, and we don't know our neighbors' names. And we don't ask for help across the fence when we need it so much.
Mhm.
And we think, I got to figure it out by myself. And so one thing that I love people to do is just to notice what are some things in my life that are challenging? What are some things in my life that I'd like to be better? And how could I bring that into community? So, for example,
Mhm.
I'm a parent, you're a parent. We all know that with young kids, especially, childcare is a thing. If you don't have family around, especially, just getting childcare is so challenging. So, or it can be so challenging. So, what if, you got on a Facebook group in your local community and went like, hey, are there any other parents? And we could do like care shares. And
Hmm.
what would that look like? I've heard of like really fun things. I know somebody who um, basically they're an adult now, but when they were a kid, there were 8 families or 7 families or something like that. I can't remember the exact number. And the families basically, the parents had gotten together and they said, let's every single Friday rotate all of our kids around our
Hmm.
houses.
Hmm.
And so basically, let's say it was 6, I can't remember, 6 families, but once every 6 weeks, you would have 6 kids or
All
eight
the
kids or
kids.
10 kids in your house.
I have
But then
friends that
every
do
other
this.
Friday night,
They
brilliant.
do. I have
Every
friends
other
that do
Friday
that.
night,
Yeah.
you had the night off.
Hmm.
When we moved into the house that we're in now, the neighbors right next to us, we just sort of like, hey, what are you guys into? What are you? And we do a thing where we'll feed each other very often. For a
Mm.
while, it was like really structured every single Wednesday. We would alternate weeks, and one Wednesday they would feed us, next Wednesday we would feed them. And then we've expanded it and tried different things over time. But, even now, my friend Celeste, who lives next door, Celeste and I, if one of us is having a hard day, sometimes we'll message the other one and be like, I'm struggling.
Hmm.
And the other one will be like, what do you need? Can I
Amazing.
take your kids for an hour? I'm making a big dinner tonight. I can make enough for you guys. I'll pull something else out of my fridge and I'll make something. I'll just make it work. I'll feed you guys
Oh,
tonight. Just this, hey, I'm going to the store. Do you guys need anything?
yes.
That means that's one less car trip. That means that's a
Hmm.
little bit less gas. That means there's a little bit more time. Maybe you get to read a book or spend a little quality time with your kids that you don't have to go to the grocery store. These little ways that we can start weaving community together. And also things like joining circles.
Mm.
Women's circles have saved my life 1,000 times over.
Yeah.
um, but joining groups and communities of folks
Mhm.
where we can actually get support, give support in a way that feels less taxing. Like,
Mm.
okay, I can relax here. I trust you. I even have friends who have created like collectives with couple friends of theirs. So
Mm.
they are in a relationship. There's other friends who are couples. And instead of going to a therapist, therapists are great, nothing against therapists, but like, and maybe they're doing this and going to a
Yeah.
therapist, but they'll also go into counsel with these other couples and say, okay, here's what's up for us this week. Can
Hmm.
you support us through it? And so this is my favorite thing about humans. My favorite thing is that we are creative
Mm. I was just going to say
and
that's so creative. I
we're
love it.
so, yeah, human
Yeah.
beings are so creative. And I think that it's part of what our species is up to. I love, I don't know if you've ever heard of or seen the show The Dog Whisperer, Caesar Milan.
I don't think I
It's like
have.
it's a dog trainer guy. This is
Okay.
like probably
Cool.
15, 20 years ago. Anyways, one of the things that I learned from watching that show 20 years ago or something was he would talk about these different breeds of dogs. And he'd
Hmm.
be like, well, the reason that your dog is acting wild and, spinning all the toilet paper off the toilet, doing this, that, and the other, and eating all your shoes, this particular breed, this is a birding breed. They're bred to bird. So you need to give your dog an opportunity to do the thing that they're designed to do. This dog breed, they're trackers. They want to track. So give them something to track. He would do these things like put chicken broth in a squeeze tube and do kind of mazes around these people's lawns. And so the dog could like track around the
Track
lawn and get
something.
a treat at the end. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But they got to do the thing that they were designed to do, that's
Hmm.
in them to do.
Yeah.
And then they wouldn't, act out of agitation for not being able to do that thing. Humans are a creator species.
Hmm.
We have opposable thumbs. We build buildings and planes and the internet and books and we create. It's what we do. We create, we create, we create. We also destroy a lot.
Mm.
Um, but we are a creator species. I think if side note, I think that just like the dogs that are destroying things when they don't get to do what they're meant to do, I think if humans were more
Hmm.
engaged in creating the more
Yeah.
beautiful world that we want to create, we wouldn't be so destructive. Um, but
Hmm.
the reason that I say this is that, when people get stumped, I'm like, oh, can we really trust that we are creative? We're innately creative. So, this is just an invitation for anybody who's listening here to look into our lives and say, what feels unnecessarily hard, or maybe not unnecessarily, but just hard, challenging, could be better.
Hmm.
And what are some creative ways that I might bring this into or weave community around this?
Mm.
And, I'm just thinking like what's something that's hard in my life that I could do this around. And I'm like, my taxes.
Uh,
And I'm like, what if I did a tax paperwork party? You
mm.
know, what if I
Yeah.
invite what if I invite like 10 of my friends and say, anybody who's like has to deal with financial paperwork, you want to come over and I'll make a big pot of soup and we'll just sit down at my dining room table together and we'll do it. We'll be together. It'll be fun in its own way, but we'll all do the thing that's feeling really hard for us to do. We'll just do it
Yeah.
together. And,
Yes.
the kids can run around and play and make chaos in the other room. Maybe we can put an adult on point with the kids while the
Yeah.
rest of us kind of focus on the paperwork. But these creative solutions
Yes.
that don't have us, that first of all make life easier now, right?
Mm.
And remind us that we don't have to do it all alone. And not only do we not have to, it's not smart. We're not
Hmm.
meant to. We're meant to do just about everything together. And second of all, this is really practically how we contribute to creating the more beautiful world that we all seem to be dreaming of and that we hope is possible. This is how we make it not just possible, but this is how we actually make it.
Mm.
And so these little but actually big ways of starting to relieve community. And I always say to people, if this is stirring something in you, that means that we are some of the leaders that are meant to create it because we're so conditioned out of it. We're conditioned actually to be embarrassed for asking for
Mm.
help,
Mm.
to feel like, oh no, I don't want to put anybody out. I don't want to make people feel pressured. And so instead, we just stay in our silos. But that's part of the conditioning. And
Hmm.
it's not gonna create that more beautiful world that we all want.
Mm.
It's not going to be just like handed to us on a silver platter. We're going to have to make it. But the good news is we're creative. We're creators. We're designed to make things and to make beauty, you know? And this is one way we can do
Mm.
it.
That was such a brilliant answer. I'm like, this is like perfect, maybe perfect time to complete, but I really appreciate how many actual examples you gave of like really how you could work this into community. And actually, one of the things that was always hard for me, and I ended up having too many things around the house that really I was finished with. I didn't need any more, but I didn't know how to get rid of. I was like, my kids once watched this TV show where we just put it out on the nature strip and the fairies come and take it away and they give it to someone else that needs it. I was like, oh, we need that service. And I found that service. We have found this app, and I found an app. My daughter found it for me. So it started as a reduce waste app, but you put your unwanted things on there and you gift them to somebody else that wants it, and you find people in your community. And that came up because you mentioned, it came into my head because you mentioned lawnmowers. It has a section for wanting to borrow things like
Yes,
lawnmowers. I'm like, how great is that? So
yes,
people can say, I want to
yes.
borrow this. Has anyone got one? And people can say, I have this if anyone wants to borrow it. So cool. People are starting to use that technology for good because, as you said, everyone actually wants this better world. And when you use your creativity and bring in community, we can do it. Mm.
Totally. What if we all cut little fairy doors big enough for adults to climb through in our fences, you
Oh,
know, and made agreements with our neighbors? Like, hey, do you guys have a lawnmower we could borrow every once in a while? do we have anything that you don't have that you might want to borrow every once in a while?
Hmm.
You know, and I do this with my neighbor Celeste also. You know, we'll say like, I don't remember what it was. There was something recently that I was gonna buy. I was gonna buy it used, and then I asked her, I think it was a bunt pan.
Hmm.
I'm like, I might use this twice a year. Do
Yeah.
you have one of these? And she was like, yeah, I have one. And I was like, I don't need one then.
Yeah.
I can just ask my neighbor twice a year, can I borrow your bunt pan?
Exactly. She
I
uses
don't
it
need one
probably
of those.
twice a year too, right?
We could probably share it around the whole neighborhood and it would still be fine. So, and actually where I live has, um, we have a lot of farm stands. And I
Hmm.
just think about how cool would that be? You know, how cool would it be if we had, you know, the neighborhood tool shed? And yes, we have to make agreements that people put things back. And yes,
Mm.
that can create some like little relational kerfuffles every now and again.
Yeah.
But also that's real life. Real life is that there are relational kerfuffles and you get annoyed at that one guy that doesn't put things back on time and then you have to
Yes.
talk about it. But then we become better at doing community and becoming being
Mm.
considerate of other people and navigating conflict. And these are all the things that we want to teach our children. We want them to be good leaders that aren't afraid of navigating conflict and that don't navigate it with um, unnecessary aggression or harshness, but can be direct and also warm. You know, we want to teach our children to share. We want to teach our children to be creative and collaborative. And yet we're like, oh no, I'm not sharing my lawnmower with anybody because what if they don't give it back? And I then have to have a conversation with them. And it's like, this is our chance to
Right.
model, to
Yeah.
create that world and to model for these little ones, to show them, not just say, share with your brother,
Yeah.
but to actually go, look, I know how to share too. And this
Hmm.
is how you do it. And sometimes it doesn't go well or it's frustrating. And then you have a conversation and you work it out. And
Hmm.
so, yeah.
Hmm. I love it. We brought in relationships and parenting and all the things, all the things. Um, I would love to give you an opportunity though to just share a bit more about the work that you do as an
Mhm.
embodied leadership coach, if I've used that right,
Mhm. Yes, 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 sure.
terminology.
Mhm.
Just in case people want to find you, I'll put all your details in the show notes, obviously. But if
Yeah.
people want to hear more about your work and what you do, I would love for you to share a little more.
Mhm. Well, I'm really passionate about changing our conversation around leadership. I think that our dominant conversation around leadership is that leaders are dominant. And so there has to be a submission on the other side, or even an oppression on the other side. That leaders are loud, that leaders are aggressive, that leaders are look, speak, act a certain way, that they have certain credentials, that they've earned a certain level. And it's all in a very hierarchical context. And I'm interested in changing our way of relating to leadership in a way that truly includes everyone, in a way that says we are all leaders in different ways at different times. And actually, all of us, all of our unique skills and gifts and talents and ways of being, natural ways of being, whether they're introverted or extroverted or loud or quiet or creative or strategic, it's all needed. If we're going to create that more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, then all of who we are truly is needed to co create that. And so that's the conversation that I'm trying to change around leadership. And so I have a course called Soul of Leadership that is really about making that embodied shift within ourselves. I also have a council called Devotional Leadership Council that is sort of like a parallel passion of mine, which is supporting women in particular who are doing really heartfelt, meaningful work in our world to have their work expand and grow in really generative ways and in ways that feel very true
Mhm.
to them. And yeah, that allow them to like grow their business and grow their work in a way that leaves a legacy and influences others in a really positive way, but also really nourishes them and supports them. And as a mom,
Mm.
I'm like very passionate about that because we don't have we can't burn out. It's
Yeah.
just, we can't do it. We got to be here for these little ones. So, um, yeah, so that is another aspect of my work as well. And yeah, people can find me on my website, nishamoodley.com, and also the same name on Instagram.
Yeah,
Mhm.
beautiful. And actually, I kind of love
Mhm.
where this conversation came. I remember doing an Envision workshop. Nisha offers these nearly the start of every year, Envision workshop with Nisha, which is wonderful. And one of the pieces that you weave into that is this future vision. And
Yeah.
you were the first person. I do think you might have credited someone else. I can't recall, but you were the first person that sort of invited this idea of picking up a newspaper and what are the headlines, like the positive, like what is the change in the world, not just in your life. And I really want to, like, I think that's magic having that in there,
Uh-huh. Thank you.
inviting
Yeah, that was
people.
a practice that I heard from Alicia Garza.
Okay.
Um, it wasn't like a whole guided meditation, but it was an idea that I had
Mm.
heard, and I was like, oh, I love that. That's really awesome. So I do credit her, and yeah, and weave that into the workshop, which is a very big, rich, long, full plan out your year, but map it out in alignment with your soul.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with me today and sharing your courage and sharing how we can all embrace our own truth and discover that and be courageous and how we can use community to start weaving and building that better world that we all want, that we all want. Really, 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 really. Thank you so, so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Joe.
Mm.